All right, well, today I wanted to talk about if women like foreign accents in men. I'll be using my personal experience during a trip to Sweden, as well as spending time in different parts of the US. I will also discuss the accents that are most universally attractive and some accents that aren't perceived as attractive. The simple answer to this question is, well, yes and no. Overall, it's going to come down to if the woman finds you attractive or not. I think if you meet the initial threshold for what the woman finds attractive, then they're going to like your accent. If they find you to be repulsive or you're just kind of plain looking in their eyes, your accent really won't do much for you outside of maybe sheer curiosity, and she might wonder like where you're from. So there are some accents that I think women find universally attractive: Australian accents, British accents, and Latin accents from places like Brazil, Spain. Those types of countries are found to be much more attractive by women around the world. I think American accents are perceived as attractive as well, at least in Europe and different parts of the world, but not to the same extent as like Australian accents, British, Latin. They don't have that like universal appeal from my experience. I knew an exchange student from Brazil as an example that I knew like late in college, and I can tell you like women loved his accent. He was also like a tall, good-looking guy, so that was a large part of probably why they liked the accent. But I can say he had a pretty, nice sounding, sweet sounding accent, so that really helped. When a woman is attracted to you and hears that you have a foreign accent, it's kind of like an amplifier effect, especially if they don't hear your specific accent very often. When a woman hears a foreign accent that she hasn't heard in a while, it's kind of like refreshing to them, and it creates a sense of like curiosity and like a spark in a way. If you're on the cusp of what a woman finds attractive, let's just say she finds you like kind of cute, or she finds you decent looking enough, and you have like a nice sounding foreign accent to her, this will definitely like give you a boost, and she will find you more appealing in a lot of cases. But I think to the opposite effect, if you're under the threshold of what she finds attractive, or she finds you just like generally repulsive, the woman may be curious where you're from, just solely based on the fact that she doesn't hear your accent very often. This isn't going to be enough to create like attraction for her. Having a foreign accent can also work against you in some cases if your accent is harder to understand. To give you an example, I knew a Norwegian exchange student in college. He was a decent looking guy, but it was just very hard to understand when he spoke. So most Scandinavian accents are pretty easy to understand. They speak very good English. Their tonality flows very well. But there are definitely some like Scandinavian accents that are a little bit harder to understand. I think Indian accents and Middle Eastern accents are the accents that are harder to understand in general. And this can definitely play against you if a woman is not understanding exactly what you're saying. I mean, I've seen it in both cases where Indian accents were very easy to understand, in other cases where the accent was just very thick and it was just really tough to hear. And I think if you have a thicker accent, you should really try to focus on speaking as clearly as possible and trying to work on a way to project your voice as much as you can. I think this could definitely help change how your accent is perceived by women and other people in general. So for context, I went abroad and I went to Sweden. I'm 6'2.5" for context, and relatively attractive. When I went over to Sweden, I noticed that a decent amount of the Swedish women I interacted with generally liked my American accent. Like, as an example, I would walk into a coffee shop. It was like the first day I arrived to Stockholm, and I go up to say my order. And I think in Sweden, like Swedish women are used to like Scandinavian men who are generally like universally attractive. They have the bone structure, they have the height. But I noticed like after I said my order, I noticed that a good amount of the female cashiers would kind of like light up in their eyes. Like after hearing my accent, they might have thought I was pretty decent looking when I walked up to the cash register, or they might have found me attractive. But once they heard my American accent, it was kind of like it was like an amplifier effect. Like they definitely kind of lit up and like smiled maybe more than, if it was just like a standard Scandinavian accent. And it's interesting, but when you're talking with a group of people, whether it's like Swedish girls or Swedish guys, I noticed that the sole fact that you have an accent, at least in my case, they were much more curious about you. I remember, girls and guys asking, about certain movies, about certain cities in the US, and they were just like generally like more interested to talk to me. I think part of it might have been my general looks, but I think a good part of it was the accent. And I think in Stockholm, it's a city where Americans do travel there, but they don't travel to Stockholm as frequently as a place like, Italy or France or, cities like London in general. So they're not used to hearing as many American accents there. I think because they don't hear them every day and the accent sounds fairly different than a Scandinavian accent, it kind of like increases your appeal. It gives you a little bit of a boost as long as you meet their looks threshold in general. I also remember going out in Stureplan, and when I approached Swedish girls, the majority of the time they either asked where I was from or remember their facial expression like changing after they heard my accent. I think that's if any Americans have ever gone to Europe, to a place that's not traveled to as much as like the major places I said, you've probably experienced this before where when a girl sees you, you might be on the cusp to them, the cusp of attractiveness, but once they hear your accent, you can see the change in their tonality and the change in their eyes, and it gives you that like little bit of a boost. From a regional perspective in the US, your accent can also come into play. So to give you an example, in Charleston, South Carolina, I had gone on a date where the girl told me that she liked my voice because it sounded more proper than what she's used to down south. I found this to be interesting because I find Southern accents to be just more appealing in general. There was also another time where I was in Boston when a girl asked me if I was from California. I had asked her what made her say that, and then she just replied with, "I don't know, you just have a California accent. I can't explain it." So I think when a woman finds you attractive, if you have an accent or a voice that she doesn't hear a lot, this causes her to become a bit more attracted in general. It kind of creates a bit of curiosity and excitement to her in a way. Now, I think in general, like a lot of women and guys too, like I think a lot of girls have curiosity about guys that live in a different part of the world than them. And when they hear an accent that is from a different part of the world and they find you attractive, it kind of creates that like mystery, and you kind of come off a little bit more as like more of a mystery man. If she finds you attractive, if she doesn't find you attractive, you're not going to be a mystery man at all. But that's kind of how that's been my experience in general. So will having a nice sounding foreign accent take you from a 7 to an 8 or a 6 to a 7? I don't think so, but it definitely helps in a lot of cases. I think the biggest key point takeaway is that the woman will be more interested in what you have to say, and it'll just be easier to carry a conversation with them, because if they genuinely like your accent and like what they hear, it's going to be much easier for them to, want to carry that conversation and want to, talk to you more and get to know you. Whereas if you have a thicker foreign accent that women just can't understand, or it's harder for them to understand, she's going to be less inclined to carry on a conversation with you. So you could be saying something that's very interesting or funny or thought-provoking to her, but because she doesn't like the sound of your accent or voice, she's not going to want to really engage with you much. And I've even seen this where, you could be like an attractive guy, and she may even find you to be attractive, but if you have a thick accent that's really hard to understand, you could kind of lose some appeal to her in a lot of ways, just because the conversation is going to be much harder. Whereas if you were an attractive guy to her and you had like a nice soothing accent, the conversation is going to flow much easier. And this could lead to you either dating her long term or hooking up, whatever it's going to be. But that's kind of what I've experienced and what I've seen with other foreign guys that I've either been friends with or knew in the past. Well, that's my take and experience on if women like foreign accents. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to comment down below your experience, and feel free to subscribe. Until next time, take care.